There we go. So you have the message. This meeting is being recorded. By continuing to be in the meeting, you're consenting to be recorded, and you can hit continue so that you can stay in the meeting. All right. Well, hello, and my name is Jackie Latzer, and as a member of the Diversity Committee of the Lake Sumter branch of AAUW, American Association of University Women, I officially want to welcome all of you. I also would like to acknowledge the other women who are on the Diversity Committee who continue to work lovingly to put these programs together. They are Linda Carpenter, Jeannie Hamilton, Judy Reinhardt, Diane Starr, and S.B. Wamsley. Thank you, ladies. It's such a pleasure to work with you. Advocacy for women and girls is not new to AAUW, as it's been going on since 1881. In addition to issues of diversity and inclusion, we address issues of gender equity in the workplace, in education, and the wage gap, among others. Additionally, the Lake Sumter branch, established over 40 years ago, promotes STEM programs for girls, provides scholarships to local women to help them complete their undergraduate degrees, as well as advocating for gender issues on the state and national level. This is our 8th in the discussions on race, and we're so glad that you're here. Together, we've been investigating the racial conditioning to which we've been subjected. Our purpose is not to shame anyone, but with new recognitions, to encourage efforts to root out the myths, misconceptions, behaviors that racial conditioning has produced. So what will we be covering today? There we go. Today, we're going to take a look at what racism looks like. We're going to then show a video. We'll go into our breakout rooms to discuss it. We then will return for our large group discussion. We'll have some polling questions, time for announcements, and a wrap-up. So let's take a look at what racism looks like. In the center here, we can see that we're reminded of the different levels of racism. Internalized racism, race-based beliefs and feelings within individuals. What do we do? What do we believe or think about others? Interpersonal racism, bigotry and biases shown between individuals in words and actions. How do we treat people? Institutional racism, discriminatory policies and practices within organizations and institutions. And systemic racism, ongoing racial inequalities maintained by society. Systemic racism is one arena that affects and leads to exacerbated inequalities in the other arenas, as we will see today by focusing on the issue of housing. In a moment, we're going to be we'll watch a video. In a moment, we're going to watch a video, but first I do want to give a shout out to my daughter-in-law, Amy Latzer, and thank her for sending us a new section from their 211 LA website, Exploring Justice. The following video is part of that program. Let's watch how redlining shaped Black America as we know it. we can't hear it.
Is it because you're muted, Linda?
Okay.
Are you looking for a new neighborhood to live in? Then come on down to Redlining Realty, sanctioned by the U.S. government. Here's depressed infrastructure.
I don't see it. I'm
No
sorry.
white people.
The
They're
video.
all in the suburbs. Heck, we'll even throw in free shoes. Now, doesn't that sound nice? Call Redlining Realty today, and we'll get you a house built on the most American foundation of all, racism. Today's baggage, redlining. Before we get into this BS policy called redlining that created housing segregation and pretty much jacked up the American dream for Black folks, let's take it back to the
I can't see anything.
America is in the thick
It's a
of the Great
blank
Depression.
screen.
And y'all, it was bad. Around 1/5 of the country was unemployed, and nearly
Okay.
everyone was
We
jerked.
need to stop the video. Could anybody
Yeah.
see it either?
No, we could hear but not see.
I don't understand. Jackie, did you unshared your screen, right? Yes, you
What?
did.
Yes, I unshared
Okay,
the screen.
hang on. Give me another shot at this.
Sure.
Ah, I see. I think it's going to work this time.
Where is the? Here.
Can you see it now?
We can see.
Yes.
You looking for a new neighborhood to live in?
So maybe we
Then
can go
come
back.
on down to Redlining Realty, sanctioned by the U.S.
Is
government.
it working now?
There's
Yes.
depressed infrastructure,
Yes.
underfunded schools, no white people. They're all in the suburbs. Heck, we'll even throw in free shoes. Now, doesn't that sound nice? Call Redlining Realty today, and we'll get you a house built on the most American foundation of all, racism. Today's baggage, redlining. Before we get into this BS policy called redlining that created housing segregation and pretty much jacked up the American dream for Black folks, let's take it back to the 1930s. America is in the thick of the Great Depression, and y'all, it was bad. Around 1/5 of the country was unemployed, and nearly everyone was dirt poor. Along comes FDR with his New Deal. Dude was trying to revitalize the American economy, which created what we now call the middle class. But not so fast. FDR's New Deal would cement racial inequality in America for generations to come and birthed two programs that enforced housing segregation: the Public Works Administration and the Homeowners Loan Corporation, known today as the Federal Housing Administration. The PWA created affordable housing, and surprise, surprise, the agency created separate public housing for Black and white folks, greatly segregating cities. Now let's talk about the Federal Housing Administration. The FHA created low-interest mortgages to build homes across the country. This agency actually built the suburbs as we know it. They basically said, hey banks, if someone applies for a mortgage, go ahead, build them a house. Even if they don't pay you back, we'll still guarantee a loan. Unless they're Black. The FHA's manual literally prohibited the occupancy of properties except by the race for which they are intended. But before we go any further, let me call on a friend to break down the legacy of redlining. The world-renowned white peopleologist from the roots, Michael Harriot.
What's up?
He's a nerd IRL. He's earned a master's degree in macroeconomics and even taught race as an economic construct to some college kids. What's good?
Please, what's going on? Good to see you in these Unpack That screeds.
How are these racist-ass government policies tie into what we now call redlining?
The term came about because the federal government, Uncle Sam and them, created color-coded maps that told banks where they could give out housing loans. The green sections were a go, whereas the red sections, typically where Black people lived, were deemed too risky. Even well-off black neighborhoods like Sugar Hill in Harlem, where black people like ZORA Hurston and Duke Ellington lived, were off limits to banks. Aside from financial barriers, there were actual physical barriers to prevent black people from living in white neighborhoods. In the early 1940s, there was a 6-foot-high wall in Detroit because redlining, and it's still there today. The Fair Housing Act put an end to redlining in 1968, but we know it ain't go down like that. Banks across the country have been caught using redlining maps as recently as 2015. And get this, most redlined areas are still low-income black and brown neighborhoods.
So FDR's New Deal pretty much screwed over generations of black folks to come? How else has redlining impacted black folks?
There's plenty, but 3 really stick out: wealth, education, and criminal justice. First, let's talk about wealth. For y'all who don't know, home ownership is the primary driver of wealth. And who has a harder time getting homes?
Black people?
Bingo. Even when home ownership is an option, homes in black neighborhoods are, on average, valued around 25% lower than homes in white neighborhoods. This is the case across the board, even if the homes in neighborhoods are similar.
So off the bat, homes in black neighborhoods are less valuable.
Yep, and the plot thickens. People in redline neighborhoods pay higher insurance premiums, they also pay higher interest rates, and are denied mortgages more often.
Hold up. We get a lot of our school funding through local property taxes. I bet that redlining impacts education too. How does that all work?
Let me ask a genius who can answer that question.
Yes, Michael, I am a genius.
No, not you. I mean Nicole Hanna-Jones. She's the recipient of the MacArthur Genius Grant and knows education like the back of our hand. See, I can hit her up on our special genius hotline. Funny, I don't see your name on the list. Nicole, tell our girl how redlining has impacted education.
We get most of our school funding through local property tax. That meant that black cities cannot produce as much money as white suburbs, which can tax at a very low rate on high property tax. And so you see vast disparities between how suburban schools that serve lots of white kids are funded and urban schools that serve lots of black and Latino kids are funded. And that all goes back to the legacy of redlining.
Wow. Did the Fair Housing Act help at all?
Once redlining and discrimination in lending and housing became illegal in 1968, we didn't rejigger all of the property values that had been directly related to redlining, which put a premium on white communities and put a much lower property value rate on black communities. It's not like we started from scratch and equalized all of these property values. We just continue to watch white communities accumulate more and more wealth and black communities be deprived. And of course, that's going to impact how schools can be funded.
Are there any places where we can really see the effects of redlining on education?
One place where you can really see this play out probably in the most oppressive way would be the city of Detroit, home to the most unequal school funding border in the country. And that's the border between Grosse Pointe, which is very, very wealthy and almost entirely white, which borders right on Detroit. The schools in Detroit are falling apart, and the schools in Grosse Pointe, one of them has marble floors.
Thanks, Nicole. That was a lot.
The cycle doesn't end there. Redlining, education, and criminal justice are all related. Let me take you on a trip to one of my favorite cities, Baltimore. Here is the original 1937 redlining map of Baltimore. Even though blacks and whites use illegal drugs at about the same rates, black people are 3 times more likely to be arrested. And where do you think they go to fight this war on drugs?
I've seen The Wire. They go to the hood.
See the red areas on the map? That's the forbidden neighborhoods, remember? Now let's look at this data of marijuana arrests between January 2013 and October 2014. Here are the heroin arrests and the crack arrests. Drug arrests and poverty are almost exclusively contained in the redlined areas. Isn't that remarkable?
You pronounced racist wrong.
And getting out of jail ain't any easier. In Maryland, 13 of the 15 zip codes with the highest bills are in Baltimore's redlined neighborhoods.
Damn.
Yeah, so basically redlining created poor neighborhoods, which led to underfunded schools, more poverty, and more black people in prison.
Let me guess. And the cycle continues?
Like a dog chasing its tail.
So the hood ain't the hood because Black people made it the hood. Rather, it was intentionally created by the government to oppress Black people through a federal policy that would adversely impact them for generations to come.
Precisely. And there's more, but that's all we had time for in this here video. Almost every quantifiable indicator of white supremacy all lead back to the government-sanctioned policy of redlining.
Michael, you just ruined my whole day. This is the last time I invite you to this show. Bye, Michael.
Ooh. Okay, wow. So let's go back and look at this. So here we'll started with housing and look at how the banks participated, how education is impacted. We know that health care is impacted and the criminal justice system, and they feed one another. So here we have this cycle, starting with the housing. Well, I don't know about you, but some of that was certainly an eye-opener. For me, shocking. Now, between what we saw in the video and what was covered with the preparatory materials, in a moment, we're going to begin our small group discussions. But we just want to remind you, we won't be recording in the small breakout room. So please, we want you to feel free to express yourselves, as we hope you will throughout the session. You'll have 15 minutes for the discussion. Let's remember to share briefly, no more than 2, maybe 3 minutes. We want to make sure everyone in the group has a chance to express themselves. You will receive a message when the time is nearly up. And when you return, again, we want to remind you, please just share only your personal perspectives. We don't need a summary of what the group discussed, because this is your personal journey, and that's what we're hoping to share together. So what we're going to ask you to discuss is oh, heck. Here we go. There we go. We're going to ask you to discuss, what do you think is the primary lesson in the examination of housing discrimination? So if you would, you've all been assigned to breakout rooms. Does everyone received that message? What do you think? Okay, good. And if you would go and say, hit join, and you'll be transposed to whatever to your breakout room, and we'll see you later. Yeah, I guess we have everyone back. Oh, there. Okay. I do want to make a point, Linda pointed out, just going back to our this graphic. Our committee chose to start with housing as the starting point for this discussion. However, we could have entered at any of these different places. They all intersect, and no doubt you realize, and we will become aware, you probably bring those points out, how they are all intertwined. There's not just one starting point or one. This is all part of a conglomerate of issues which have continued to perpetuate this disparity between race. So we would love to hear your sharings and your aha moments. And again, please share just your perspective, not the group summary. If you would, use your raise your hand feature, and we'll start calling on you and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Judith has her hand raised.
Judith Southard.
Yes, sir. Judy. I started to change it to Judy, but I noticed there are several Judys here, so I don't mind being Judith. I mentioned to my group that a heartbreaking moment for me was when I discovered that the GI Bill was not the wonderful thing for Black veterans that it was for white veterans, because they used the guidelines for the FHA. So they used redlining against Black veterans, just like any other Black person who wanted to buy a home, and it was just so heartbreaking to me that, and the same happened with the GI Bill when it came to education for them, because so many colleges would not accept Black students, and they didn't care if they were veterans or not. They would not be accepted. And that's just the GI Bill to my generation, my father's generation. He was a veteran of the US Navy during the war, and it was so wonderful for the white people. And it's just, and it's made a difference. I think that's one of the things that has made such a difference now, even now, in wealth.
Yes, that's what they were, the point was being made, and we're seeing that and hearing it again and again. Thank you, Judy. Ginny Rivera.
This has been a painful journey. I can't believe the government had such a big part in creating this perfect nexus of systemic racism. For the first time, I think reparations are something we should consider. Though I don't know how any government is ever going to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point. And that is such a complete topic, a huge topic. I'm going to ask, we're going to step away from that at this time and may take a look at that as a whole session. So we want to thank you for bringing it up, Ginny, but I think let's kind of hold that in abeyance, because as I say, that's such a big topic. The committee is considering it as a session in and of itself. Thank you so much, though, for pointing that out. Thank you. Linda Roberts.
Thank you. One of the things I brought up in our session was, in addition to the redlining, one of the preparatory materials that we were encouraged to look at was the TED Talk called Geographic Inequality. And that was about the city of Minneapolis. And in addition to redlining, which they touched on briefly, he also spent a lot of time talking about racial covenants. And that's the other aspect of this housing discrimination. Racial covenants were covenants that were written into deeds, which basically said that a home could only be sold to members of a certain race, Caucasian race, excluding Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, and other minorities at the time. So that, along with the redlining, were the two aspects that really created this huge housing discrimination event. Mm-hmm. I think, and both of those, in the film they mentioned that redlining was outlawed in '68. I think racial covenants also at the same time. But the lesson, to me, the primary lesson from all of this, which was again pointed out in the film we saw earlier, is that the legacy of that still exists today with, for example, Black communities and white communities of similar homes, etc. The Black communities, the valuation on those homes nationwide 25% lower. So the legacy of those policies still exists 50 years later. And I think, I mean, for me, looking at this is number one, I think the lesson is let's make sure that we're all aware that these kind of systemic institutional discrimination policies are never invoked again, number one. Number two, which is the harder one, is what can we do about it now? You know, I think about what can I as an individual, or what can we as a society do now to address this inequality? That's the bigger issue, and I don't have the answer to that, but I think it's the topic that needs to be further discussed.
Thank you. And there's so much to that. There's so much to that. And we can take a look even on a small scale. Anytime we see that there is injustice, speak up. Again, we have allyship we can stand up for. We can make sure we, you know, it occurred to me this morning to, I don't know if I read all the covenants when we signed the contract to buy this house, if there's anything in there. So, but we certainly should take a look at our homes too, and see what's in there and see if there's something that needs to be undone. So thank you, Linda. SB.
Oh, hi. Thank you for the presentation. I didn't realize until now how badly it started from housing and to all facets of life. Everywhere you turn, there seems to be discriminatory, education, criminal justice system, institution, and what have you. And what was going through my mind? Now, where do we start now as an individual? What can each one of us do to, you know, mitigate this, to start changing things? And that is a big, big step. It is probably something we have to look inside ourselves. What can I do? If I'm in an institution, let us say, maybe I would have the power, if I have that power, to hire and all that, affect their policies and what have you. But as an individual, what came to my mind is maybe have some kind of a conversation, of what I call conscious conversation with a minority. And then they can probably establish some goodwill and better understanding of one another. To me, that is enriching. I'm learning something from that person, and that recipient is learning something from me. I think that's, in my thinking, that's what we can start as an individual.
So I think what I hear you say, it goes back to having relationships is at the crux of eliminating prejudice or racism. If we get to know someone, then it changes the lens through which we see them, if I understand what you're saying, SB. Thank you. So I do want to mention before we have some other folks that, well, let's listen to a call on Dottie and Lou Sassmore, then we'll share what was in the chat.
I am much more concerned about solving a problem than deciding who or what caused it. And what bothers me is the law of unexpected consequences. The primary reason subprime, the whole subprime lending structure was put in by the government through the Fannie Mae and FHA was that they wanted to get low income, low and lower middle income families, translation minority, into the housing market. When you had individuals getting very low interest rates and for over 100% of the value of the house, it was risky. When the market crashed in 8 and 9, these people got wiped out. The majority of the damage was done to the minority communities they started out to help. They were hurt most by the crash. So I think we have to be a little bit careful and think very carefully about unexpected consequences of things that we try to make right. Yep.
Jackie,
yeah.
Can I comment here?
Sure.
I think you're correct to a certain extent, Lou. But the subprime mortgages that led so heavily to that crash, realtors and other people of that sort had been practicing that subprime technique with Black people for years prior to the crash. And when things crashed, people started to pay attention because white people went under. Let me again recommend the book, The Sum of Us, by Heather McGee, where she points out, rightly so, that minorities, in particular Black people, were targeted with that particular technique. And it was buffed and polished to a high luster when it was unleashed on white people who could no more afford it than the Black people could. The point here is that everybody loses from these discriminatory policies. Yes, indeed, people of color, I would be the last one to say that they don't. They suffer the most, they suffer the longest. But we have to realize that there is a cost to all of us. I would kick out there the question, how are we responsible? How did we manage to support this particular line of behavior on the part of our government?
Because it was done, unfortunately, with the best of intentions, and we know where that road leads.
Well, I think we have to look back. I'm sorry. I think we do have to look back. The predatory lending practices, as Linda's pointed out, started long before. My understanding is this was not benevolent to give out these predatory loans. This wasn't to fix anything. Yeah, we have a comment, not the best of intentions. But the whole issue started, look at where that started. I think it started way before 2008 and 2009. The fact that it was built into our system, into the system that was signed into law by our President Roosevelt, who had good intentions up to a point, apparently, but was so exclusionary. I think that's, again, do we want to blame? We're trying to learn and want to find ways to ameliorate this horrendous situation. The fact is, I don't know if we all were aware that it started way back then. It included finding ways to exclude people of color from the Social Security system. I was shocked when I read that. Again, maybe many of you knew that, but this mentality of less than, this is something that truly we have to overcome. We have to recognize we're all part of the same human family and need to be treat each one fairly. So I'm not going to, on and on and on, but that to me, I have to say, I think is the crux. The fact that we don't have respect for all people, regardless of appearance or whatever. Now we will share with you, we've had a number of folks that have shared some resources that you might want to read for background, and they'll be shared, but one of them is called When Affirmative Action Was White by Ira Katz-Nelson. Another one is The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, and Healing the Divided Society, Investing in America 50 Years After the Kerner Report So we will share all of those. They were up on the chat, but if any of you want to investigate further, we have those to offer.
Jackie, we have another speaker, Carletta Knox Seymour.
Please.
Hi, Carletta. It's good to see you.
Hi, Linda. Thank
Glad
you.
you made it.
Yes, me too. So, hello, everyone. So, thank you, Lou, for what you said and for what everyone else has shared. I'm going to have to go with Jackie and say I got to go back a little bit on this because, boy, oh boy, oh boy. So, in terms of the first time an African was put on this soil, there was already a plan to deprive Black people, African people of anything. So if you start there in terms of the genesis of deprivation of not even thinking of Black people, African people as humans, just chattel, then, you know, that kind of thinking started way back then. And then just in terms of the post-Civil War, with respect to General Sherman, we've all heard this before, the 40 acres and a mule, when he tried to give, and he did give, the swath of land to freed Black folk back then. And then that was changed in less than a year. I wrote a paper on that, and actually an op-ed that I submitted to the local newspaper here in Cedar Rapids during the social injustice, what am I trying to say, in terms of all the different things that were going on after George Floyd and all the other deaths. But absolutely. So primary example, what's the lesson there? That it was done on purpose. And so so that mentality is still in place. So in terms of moving forward, which we've all been talking about, this is year 2021. I mean, it's just kind of ludicrous in some ways that we're still talking about this. It's just kind of mind-boggling. But here we are. And some things have changed, many things have not. The video was fantastic. I was kind of laughing because I was like, this is so superb. This should go out like a commercial. And so this is real. And so how do you propose, Lou, to go forward, for example, you know, to knock down the barriers, to get at the lenders, to get at the, I was a city planning commissioner for Cedar Rapids for 6 years. And that was just dealing with a lot of white folk stuff in terms of zoning, let alone anything with respect to Black folk. So there's so much work to be done. But, you know, if it started with the federal government, and even I would argue that General Sherman and that whole thing thereafter, that's still government. So in terms of the taking away. So if it started with government, and those who are of government in terms of power, then that's where I think for the most part it's going to have to be. But if we still have people in power that are in power now who don't think like you and I, then that's the crux. That's the problem. That's where you have to get in. And that becomes when people learn how to vote, you know, and from in the municipal cities and state and what have you, you know, that's where you get in and get the legislators to change their way of thinking, because otherwise it's not going to change. It's going to be round and round the circle. Here we go again.
Thank you, Carletta. So many points you made. First, one thing, if you wouldn't mind, if you might send us a copy of the paper that you wrote, I think we'd be very interested. Certainly our committee would be very interested, if that would be okay with you. Thank you. Also, I think I'm just going to say, and then we're going to go on. It is so important to change laws, but we've also seen, even with the Equal Rights Amendment and what voting rights amendments, we can have the laws on the books, and that has to change. Those have to be changed, but it's still, how is it carried out? It's the mentality, right? We have to work on all areas, and that's why we started with the individual with the sessions, because we all have to make adjustments. And I think we're doing those dives within ourselves to say, well, wow, I didn't think I was, but yeah, look at this. So we have to make internal changes that affect our behaviors and how we influence those who are in government as well. So I think it's a top, and it doesn't just start at top or start at bottom, but all of that has to be addressed. Judy Bond.
Oh, I'm not sure where to begin. I'm sitting here, and I think from what I can see of my picture, I look very grumpy and depressed, which I am. In my session in our little group, I discovered that I had a way more protected childhood than I ever dreamed I had. And now I'm wondering if it's even possible to do anything about it. Something that's been going on for so long. I didn't know the government forced people to live in certain places. I didn't know that. I grew up having been told that people tend to cluster together with people like themselves. So that made it appear that everybody was living where they wanted to. And that then lent credence to the things that I was told about, well, they live that way because they want to. I'm sorry, but I'm blown away today, and I don't know what I can do. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm done.
But isn't this so important? One, we appreciate your honesty, Judy. But the very fact of, again, becoming aware and now wanting to make adjustments, again, within ourselves, within the circles we travel, we know we don't have to stop learning till we take our last breath. So this just opening our minds is one piece of it. But today we're looking at how the system, and as Carletta pointed out, the system started way before the housing discrimination began. It started with bringing slaves over to this country. But this attitude, which has been perpetuated for so long, and it's not a legacy, it's current today. And we're seeing and hearing how the gap between whites and people of color is wider than ever. So this is a very current problem and situation. So let's see. We've had Edwina Sessions shared that voting at the local levels, she suggests, is key. Things will not change until mindsets are changed and elected officials can understand the needs of all the people. And there was another suggestion, Judy suggested Stony the Road by Henry Louis Gates. She said is a place to, he's from West Virginia, a great place to begin in learning about racism after the Civil War. So we have a lot, and again, these are things we will add to our resources, which we'll share with you in the future. But okay, let's hear from someone we haven't heard from yet. Suzanne.
No, Jackie, Ginny Rivera is next.
Okay, but she spoke already. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's the reason I said if we could hear someone who hasn't yet spoken.
Okay.
If that's okay, Ginny, let's hear from Suzanne Young Mercer. Suzanne?
So I want to also say thanks to Judy, because I think that's where we start. You know, like I know she said, I don't know where to begin. I think beginning is realizing that you now understand that things that you thought were normal aren't really that normal. And then I want to make a comment to Jackie. We weren't slaves when we were brought over here. We were enslaved. We were men and women that lived and had, lives that had nothing to do with America. And then we were brought over here and enslaved. So I think I know words matter. I think words matter. And so enslaved is more appropriate now than slaves, because, we weren't slaves there and we became enslaved here. So that's my comment.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, microaggression, thank you. We're all learning. Thank you.
Lisa Beavers is next as a person who has not spoken yet before. Jenny, hang on, we'll get back to you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Just wanted to comment on the awareness we're all gaining is just amazing, because I was so mad reading all this material. I wasn't aware either. And I'm from the Detroit area, so it's just very hard to see a wall is still up, and what the freeways, even that idea that the freeways came in and even divided people more. And just the huge problem of how 400 years of this issues have gone on, and how do you help now when we hear this? Well, I start to think of some ideas, just some ideas. And that might be helping to, with education, give to a scholarship. Have people in this group gather together in small groups to come up with ideas for race amity type of projects, to tutor in the schools, young children. I'm working with young children right now and teaching values that are so important for young people to change their ways of thinking. But mostly to share with the family. The man who just walked behind me, I shared all this material with him. Well, we eat, we use the time to watch the videos. Take a chance to share this with everyone you interact with. Those are just some small ideas, but I'm going to pray tonight. That's what I'm going to do.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks.
Jackie, here are a couple of comments in the chat that I think are worth mentioning. Christine Loken Kim, back when we were talking about the predatory lending, said no, they didn't do it with the best of intentions. They knew what they were doing. And I tend to be more cynical than the average pup, so I agree with her. I think it was being done very purposefully. And I don't know, our discussion on reparations will be interesting, because I don't know what can be done to repair what has been done intentionally for generations and centuries. So the other comment is from Jill Moss Greenberg, and for those of us who are right here in Florida's friendliest hometown, what we are discussing is not only a legacy, Jill says, it's going on today, including in our area of Florida. And I'm going to vent just a little bit, so bear with me. Judy Bond, my journey has been much like yours, although I think I had a different view of the world starting. The more I read, the iller I become. And that discomfort has led me to become, I think, boring and not fun. Because every single thing I hear and read, I see racism as the driving motivation. And that is causing such intense discomfort part of me steps aside and says, yay, you should be uncomfortable and continue to be uncomfortable. But I don't know how to get across to those people who are currently in power to make decisions that will benefit everyone, not just the zero-sum game of if you are given a freedom, it means I have less. That makes me crazy because it's entirely possible to have a win-win situation. And I think that however we do it, maybe it means we become boring and not fun. But the message needs to be beaten loudly like a drum. And the more uncomfortable we become, yay, the better we need to be. That's all.
Linda, thank you so much. Okay, let's give Ginny a chance and then we'll hear others. Oh, you have to unmute, Ginny.
I just wanted to bring up as a potential help thing. Remember when everybody smoked and nobody thought it was wrong, and there was a years-long campaign of facts and news and commercials all saying smoking is bad for you, and people like me eventually stopped smoking a pack and a half a day and got over it. But it was hard. So maybe some kind of a campaign to make people aware of the problems would be a good idea. That's all. And I have to leave soon. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ginny. Okay, let's hear from Jan Shepherd.
Okay, I just want to say a couple things about housing issues that are going on in Columbus, Ohio, where I live right now. And I have made friends with an African-American woman who deals with housing loans. And well, there's a couple of things, pro and con, that are going on with housing in Columbus, is that white folks with money have discovered that they can buy these beautiful old homes that are in disrepair because they've been lately in communities where people didn't have the means to keep them up. So then, and that's mostly people of color in those neighborhoods, but now white folks are buying and gentrifying the area, which does raise the property taxes. So in a sense, I guess it helps the schools, but on the other hand, the folks that have lived there for many years can't afford the new property taxes. So they're going to be forced to move as well. And, but the other opposing positive thing that's going on is there is a program by one of the banks to assist people who are of lower income. They still have to qualify according to certain standards to get their mortgages, but the standards for credit rating have been lowered for them, and there is a special lending program to assist them to buy houses in other neighborhoods that need rehabilitation, and also to give them a break on property taxes while they're in the process of rehabilitating those neighborhoods. So, and I have a chance to be involved with this, but because of COVID, I just haven't got with my friend, and it's a new program for her. So somehow we're going to work together. I'm going to be in a very minor role, but I'm looking forward to it as a way of helping with the housing issues.
Thank you. You know, though, it's interesting when you mention gentrification, it reminds me of an interview with James Baldwin where he says urban renewal means, at that time, it means Black removal. And I think, again, when we talk about good intentions, let's recognize urban renewal or gentrification means Black removal. And I know myself, I've always wondered, well, we're displacing all these folks. They won't be able to afford to move back in. Where are they supposed to go? Okay, so let's see. I think Linda Roberts has a comment. Linda?
Yeah, thank you. Just one other thought about what we can do. When we talk about what happened in the 2008-9, the collapse of the real estate market and the predatory lending that that really created that. It was built on these mortgages with floating interest rates, and then when it all collapsed, you know, the mortgage payments, you know, had skyrocketed. So that's what led to a lot of the bankruptcies and foreclosures. But what fueled that was that, you know, all those mortgages were packaged into these collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs, and sold to investors. So that's how the population really served to feed that by the pension plans, other institutions purchasing these CDOs. And so, you know, what my thought is that the other way we can begin to address this is where we put our wealth, where we put our money. And, you know, looking at companies, you know, as we invest in the stock market and that sort of thing, looking at companies that promote diversity and equality. A lot of companies are really beginning to address this now in terms of the composition on the board and their human resource policies and that sort of thing to promote equality and diversity. In fact, like I have one of the investments I'm considering is it's a private equity fund, and it's called an anti-bias fund. And basically it's to invest in minority enterprises. And it's one I'm thinking. I have some investments through this one private equity firm, and they just launched this anti-bias fund a couple of months ago. And I'm getting knowledge about that fund at this point. But I think that's the other way to kind of look at the whole issue is, you know, where we put our money.
Thank
Jackie,
you. That's a very good point. It's again something we can do, and again becoming more conscious of where we put our money, because our money represents our values many times. So yeah, okay. Would you want to say something, Linda?
Hang on a second, Jackie. I just wanted to inject here. Judy Reinhardt is one of our committee members, and when we were planning this discussion about housing issues, she brought to our attention an initiative called Purpose-Built Communities. Did I get that right, Judy? There's one right here in Orlando. It started in Atlanta with the East Lake community. And I'm trying to remember the name of the community in Orlando, but you may want to look that up. They have communities all over the country, largely up and down the East Coast and kind of the eastern quarter of the nation, where they are taking blighted communities and bringing in resources related to schools and healthcare, not displacing the people who live there, but bringing in the community supports and housing improvements that will make the community not blighted, and in generations to come will be a more thriving community. It's an interesting other way to go. It's a private corporation, but that may be something else to explore as things to look at that are being done and that can being done. And again, thanks to Judy for bringing that to us.
And one of the things, just to add to it, I'm glad you reminded us of that, Linda. The key, which is so key anyway, is that it isn't just money coming in with folks thinking they know better what the community needs. They go to the community and sit down and have discussions, what is needed, and determine based on the community's input what's needed and how to go about it. And that's why, so it looks like it's been quite successful, and it's really worth checking out, the purpose-driven community, right? Purpose. So take a look at that. Now, a few people, and we're going to go on, but it goes back to, again, put your money where your mouth is. And a number of folks have shared ways that they're doing it. One person has said, a number of them have talked about donating and being part of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund to help with litigation expenses and all sorts of work that they do. Another one has said that they also have made pledges to themselves. If I don't, I'm sorry, I'm not identifying you, forgive me. Donate the scholarship funds in the community to help high school students with tuition. So there are things we can do to be of assistance, to we can, again, find these, if it's, again, as Linda pointed out, to check out if you're going to be on the stock market. Take a look, wherever we're putting our funding, let's take a deep dive to see what are their policies, how are they treating people, how are they treating the community. So, all right, so that's that one. I think next was Gay Burchard. Yeah, Gay, please.
Just real quick, when you guys look into your next topic, you were the city of Evanston, Illinois is just doing a whole new program. It was on the news the other day about how they're going to use money they're going to get from marijuana sales and go back into these communities that are Black in the Evanston, Illinois, and help them redo their homes. And I don't know exactly how they're doing it because it was only really quickly on the news, but it's Evanston, Illinois, and they're going to be putting money back into the Black community from the sale of marijuana, whatever, the money they're going to get from that. So it's an interesting concept. And so I thought you guys might want to look into that. And the other thing, just real quick, for 30 years, I worked at a university hospital, and we had a woman that was the human resource person, and she was a Black lady, and she set up a program with a high school where we did mentoring the high school students, and everybody from doctors to the hospital. We had all of us got involved in mentoring these high school students. And I mentored a Black girl for 3 years, and it was really, really interesting, and got her into university. And so these are some other ways that people can get involved, and especially with the high school kids. So that's all I have to say.
Good suggestion.
Yes, that's another good suggestion. Before I call on Jill, just one moment. You know, one thing strikes me though. We talk about, well, let's fix the Blacks' neighborhoods. Let's make them better. Well, that's a good idea. But you know what? To my mind, that's still maintaining a separate neighborhood. And I think, although again, people may want to stay where they live or may not. But I think we need to think beyond just keeping people where they live. The key is people need choices and don't have to live in a ghetto, don't have to live in a concentrated area. Isn't that what redlining has done? So yes, I think it's lovely to say let's help the neighborhoods who have been so neglected by design, but let's not say, well, let's fix it so they'll all stay there. Quote, please forgive me, understand my tone. And I think there's much more to it than just keeping people where they live. My 2 cents. Jill Moss Greenberg, please.
Okay. Jackie, you mentioned one thing from James Baldwin, and I do want to recommend the book by Eddie Glaude, which is based on the works of James Baldwin, and it really gives you a context for what we're talking about. But one of the quotes that Eddie Glaude talked about from Baldwin, I'm paraphrasing, but it was a challenge to us. How can we create ourselves without having the need to have an enemy?
Oh, beautiful.
So important, because it seems relevant to what we're talking about. I'm struck with the difference between benevolence and respect. So many of the things people have been talking about are reaching down, and we're not reaching down if we're going to make a difference. It's how we're reaching across and how we're actually having dialogue with respect. The other thing I still see in the culture and in the schools, teachers again and again will tell me they're very proud of being colorblind. And I think, again, that's people see that as a good thing, and yet it's in no way seeing the different life experience. And I'll just say, one of my good friends who was African American is a president of a university. His son was driving while Black and was pulled over by the police because it was in his dad's Mercedes. Well, his dad was the president of a university. He got pulled over and he was taken into arrest. My son would never have to be thinking about that, nor do we as a family. So it's so much that is built in that isn't just economic. And clearly we should not be proud of that. The other part is there are some solutions, excuse me, some good things where schools and education are so tied to the property taxes, so that people mention that wealthier communities have more well-endowed schools than the communities able to buy additional equipment or programs for the schools. I'm going to give an example for the state of Maryland, where I came here from, which just 2 years ago passed an Educational Equity Act for the whole state, which is very important and a great model. It's not equality, it is equity. The schools are not being funded equally. Those that have lower income communities are getting greater resources. To be equitable, they need more resources to have comparable levels of education and services for those communities. So the educational equity is a huge issue rather than equality and a tax-based education program. And then the very last thing I wanted to mention was, because I think it was Carletta mentioned about her paper and after the Civil War, and most of you know, I hope you know, that we have the community of Royal near the villages. I hope everyone's been there, and if not, after COVID is over, we should meet there. But that's the largest remaining community in the United States that is from post-Civil War, 40 acres and a mule. And there's still many African-American families, they are Black families who still have their 40 acres. Some families have 80 acres, but the history of that community and the sustenance of that community since, in all those years since, I think is a very good education for all of us, and to look at how that effect is going forward too.
Jill, thank you so much. In that regard, actually, we had Ms. Beverly Steele from the community of Royal did a program for our branch of AAUW just last month and did share with us the history of Royal and 40 Acres and a Mule. And if anyone is interested, we do have a video of it, and we could make that available if anyone would like to see it. So we'd love to share that. And could you just, I missed it, the state where they're working on equity for education, where is that being done, Jill?
It's Maryland, and it's called the Kirwan Report, Kirwan.
Okay.
It was a huge struggle to get it passed. Maryland has a Democratic legislature and a Republican governor, and he vetoed it, and the legislature overrode his veto.
Wow. Okay, thank you. And again, that point about equity versus equality, so important. I think we've used it and we've had reference to, there's a cartoon, but equity being targeting where the need is, not just handing it out everywhere so the rich get richer and the rest maybe. So thank you also for pointing that out.
Jill, could I ask you, you talked about Eddie, am I saying his name right? Glaude?
Glaude.
What is the name of the work that he did that was based on Baldwin? Do you know offhand?
I'll have it in my living room. I'll try and run over there and put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad
That's the red cover.
Carletta is next.
Okay, we have some people interested in the video of Royal. We're keeping a track of the chats, right, Linda? We'll have
they're
that.
being recorded.
Good.
Yeah.
So we're going to respond if we haven't. And Carletta has had her hand up.
Yeah, and just to be mindful of Eddie Glaude, it's Professor Eddie Glaude. So I just want to make that point.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. We
So-
want to be respectful. Now, I
Right.
think we're going to have where it's a
Wait, Jackie,
sure.
that was just a correction. I think Carletta, that was not her comment.
apologize. I'm so sorry.
So very quickly, because I know we're short on time, getting short on time. So this goes back to, and I don't remember who was speaking at the time. It might have been Linda. I don't remember. But in terms of, I think it was you, Gay, who was talking about mentorship and that kind of thing. And then someone commented after you with respect to, mentoring Black children and all those things are great and good. But so I have several different comments, different areas. So that one, I wanted to just comment and say that, yes, we are working on trying to lift up Black kids, Black families, that kind of thing. But there is so much to do within white neighborhoods, within white families in terms of creating understanding within there. I mean, Black kids kind of already know where they are. They already understand their situation, their plight, unfortunately. But I think a lot more emphasis needs to be on white families, white people developing a different way, a better way at looking at systemic racism, housing, banking, the whole bit. So yes, it's for us in terms of Blacks being lifted up and other minorities, of course, but right now we're talking Black. But it is also for, and should be, more of white people really delving into this kind of thing so that they get the understanding, so that they understand redlining on a regular basis in terms of just what does one neighborhood look like versus another neighborhood, and why are you who else had said that? Judy, I think, that said that she was wonderfully sheltered, but now doesn't know how to see the world because it's so messed up. So not going on. And in terms of the no color blind, the color blind, oh, I don't see color. I mentioned this the other day, if it wasn't yesterday, with the committee that I said to a white person that I know, white woman, that I really get appalled. I am appalled when I hear white people say, I don't see color. I say again, you see color because you see me.
Right.
I have color. so when I say embrace me in my color, in who I am, but please don't say you don't see color, because then that disacknowledges who I am. So other point, 1619 Project. I think many of us know that at least in Iowa anyway, the legislators were, and I think this may be nationwide, but I know it happened in Iowa, that the legislators, Republican legislators, have gone against the 1619 Project. Many of you know what that is, right? The 1619. Yeah. Okay. So, and said that there would be a penalty for any school that would take that up in terms of adding it to their curriculum. And so just in terms of that adds a value for education, for historical purposes, because God knows that in terms of what government has done, what education has done to most of us has been lies. And so we need correction at levels like that. Just to say very quickly, many years back when I lived in Milwaukee, this had to be the 1990s, mid to late 1990s. In terms of neighborhood, and that neighborhood that we lived in, my children and I, after divorce, but the neighborhood we lived in was adequate. It was okay. It wasn't maybe the best, but it was adequate. It was very decent. Black neighborhood is what I'm saying, mostly. And but what happened was, and I was renting at that time, but what happened was that they started closing the schools down. They did not repair the schools. They stopped putting stock and value into the neighborhood schools. And when, no matter how many families went and fought for it, no matter what, they still shut them down. And it forced those Black kids and families, of course, but those Black kids to go stand on a bus in cold Milwaukee during the winter at 5 a.m. to be transported an hour away from their homes. And by the time they got to school, they're up and down, all crazy. So that may have been something that adds to when educators, others started giving, perhaps more, but started giving, Ritalin, the medication to, these Black kids they're so hyper, they're so this, we got to tone them down. If you look at some of the things that were being done to them, not eating well, who's going to eat breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning, and realistically, and then get themselves ready for school, stand on the bus corner, wait forever, then be bussed away. And I mean, that's ridiculous in and of itself. So it was a failure to begin with. But what I'm saying, back to housing, back to closing schools, all of that is mixed together in terms of systemic racism. I'm done.
Wow, so rich. Thank you, Carletta. You touched on so many things. And I particularly, I think I will just focus on one, which is what we're trying to do here. One of the things I think Lisa mentioned too, we have to make sure that our children are taught properly. I think allyship certainly is one way, but to change the thinking, and I think that's also what we're working on doing here. We're so glad to see that there's some diversity, so we hear voices other than white voices, but we need to, as you said, we have to talk to white folks because they're the ones right now with white privilege who need to change their attitudes primarily. So you made many wonderful points. I just wanted to just reiterate that. So thank you so much. Now, good. So thank you for, we could kind of end on that rich sharing that you did, Carletta, Miss Carletta. We are going to, so first of all, thank you all for participating and bringing your honest reflections with you that certainly enhances this whole interaction. And we wish, and I think this is what's important, and perhaps again, something that we might look at is creating smaller groups where we could really sit down together and learn from one another face to face. Again, as we know each other as people, that I think that the walls of prejudice melt, because we know we're people, we have so much in common, and yet we are diverse and bring the beauty of that diversity together. So we do have, excuse me, if I may, we do have a couple of polling questions we would like to offer you. We'd like to ask you to participate in those. Is this my, here's this. Again, the polling questions are anonymous. Linda's going to put them up for us, and the questions you'll be asked. Here they are. Did anything you learned about this topic shock or surprise you? Yes or no? Segregated housing has affected me. And we have 3 choices: not at all, somewhat, a lot. And I realize I might be missing out on the benefits of a diverse community. Strongly disagree, neither agree or disagree, but anyway. So those are our 3 polling questions. If you would go ahead. We'll take a moment.
And I think that's everybody.
That's everyone, because the hosts, well, those of us can't do it. Yeah.
Got it. And
okay,
there are the results.
So just read them out for us, Linda, please.
Evidently, about 2/3 of us were shocked or surprised about something we learned on this topic. Segregated housing has affected 44% of us, but 26% said that it affected them a lot. And finally, 37, a little bit better than 1/3 of us, strongly agree. Another 1/4 fully agree that we might be missing out on the benefits of a diverse community. Every once in a while, I feel like we're preaching to the choir. But the more we can get our message out there, talking to people who don't come to this discussion, there will be a ripple effect. So I think that we're making a difference here, and I hope we're making a difference here. And thank you for all of your very thoughtful participations.
Yeah. So as promised, I think that some of that was interesting. I really think, what was one of the questions about, have I been affected by segregated housing? Even if we may not be aware, if we grew up in all white neighborhoods, I would say for myself, I've been affected by it. I don't think I realized it at the time, but I sure realize it now. So this has been quite the journey. Now,
Jackie, before you wrap up, Judy Southard has one more comment to make, and then I think we need to wrap up.
Then we're going to have announcements as promised. Go ahead, Judy.
I was just going to take my hand down because you said what I was going to say. We've all been hurt by segregated housing. This whole idea of racism, the whole thing has hurt our nation. We are bleeding. It's killing us. Everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, some more overtly.
Literally and figuratively.
Yes, yes, and some more overtly than others. Thank you. Now, we promised if there were any of you who had announcements, we have this little space of time for you. Does anyone have any announcements they want to make?
Let me just point out a comment that Suzanne shared in the chat earlier. She is recommending a podcast entitled Seeing White. It's about a 14-part series. You can find it, I suspect, on YouTube. It's, as Suzanne said, it talks about how the term white was developed and goes from slavery through affirmative action and many of the issues that we've been discussing here today. So it's yet another resource that we would recommend to you.
And so again, we are compiling another resource list, and all of your recommendations and suggestions are being noted. We have the record of the chat, so we'll cull those from there and we will make those available soon.
Yeah, I think volume 2 of our resources list is going to be ready to go after the additions from today, and we'll then start collecting entries for volume 3.
Ah, lovely. Well, again, we want to thank each of you for your heartfelt contributions, the knowledge that you have, the resources you've provided, your honesty, your openness, our willingness to, no matter how old we are, that we know we still can learn, and we're not finished till we're finished. So bravo to each one of you who are here, to all of us who are participating, and we'll reiterate, please let others know. We want to have more and more people participate. We will hope to open hearts and minds because this is the most challenging issue in this country and requires our devoted attention. So in our earlier sessions, we know we focused on internal and external, and on internal and interpersonal issues of racism, learning about white privilege, where our biases came from, that we have them at all, and how we act on them. In more recent sessions, as now we've been broadening our focus to look at systemic racism, and we've used housing as the focus, and we see that housing and all of this systemic racism, it's all intertwined and it affects everyone. Again, there are those who are overtly affected, but each of us is affected. As a matter of fact, I would offer that whatever prejudice we hold hurts not only the victim of our prejudice, but hurts ourselves. So again, in trying to make it a win-win, we all benefit as we work to root out this racial conditioning to which we've been subjected in this country. So I wonder, how can we bear to continue after discussions like this and these awarenesses? How can we continue to bear in our old ways when such a large number of our brothers and sisters are held back from achieving their full potential? Won't we all do better when everyone's potential has the opportunity to be fulfilled? Let's take our new learnings and through vigilant scrutiny, adjust our lens, revise our views, modify our behaviors, and become allies as a result of the knowledge that we're gaining. So, we will have our next session next month, and that will be, our next session is going to be the 4th Wednesday of the month, April 28th at 10:30, and we will be addressing systemic racism, voting rights, which we know is big on the table. So please, if you have suggestions, you've given us some, but here is our email address. If you have anything else you'd like to send to us, and again, we would love to receive, if Ms. Carlotta, if you'd share that paper with us, we would be most appreciative. And here we thought, oh, there might be a question to think about as we leave. What might be other parts of our community and everyday lives that have been affected by housing segregation? So we leave you with that and so much that has been shared today. Again, our heartfelt thanks to each one of you. We look forward to the next time. We appreciate each one of you. And we will see you next month, if not before. And we will get out those other, we'll let you know how to access the videos, the video about the Royal Community, 40 Acres and a Mule, as well as being able to view this on YouTube. So thank you all so very, very much. Until next time.